Hi, everyone, let me take a deep breath before I start because even now, when I think about that time, my heart still races. I was the typical atheist mom, you know? The kind who looked up at the sky and saw only clouds, nothing more. I was raised in a home where God was just a soap opera topic, so I grew up believing we had to handle life on our own. Science explains everything. Faith is a crutch. I used to tell my coworkers while sipping coffee in the office break room. I was proud of my cold logic. Vaccines, medicine, financial planning, that's where I put my trust. But deep down, there was this emptiness I tried to cover up with a packed schedule, expensive toys for my son, and Netflix nights until I passed out. I thought I had everything under control. Little did I know that God's presence was already hovering around my home, waiting for the right moment to reveal himself. It was just me and Lucas, my little 5-year-old boy, a team of two. A husband? He had left when Lucas was 2, and I swore I'd never need anyone again. Just us against the world. I'd say, kissing his forehead before bed. He was my light, my reason to wake up at 6 every morning, even with dark circles under my eyes. But I'll admit, sometimes I'd look at his sleeping face and feel a fear I couldn't explain. What if something happens to me? What if I can't handle it? I'd push the thought away with strong coffee and a "stop being silly, Anna." Faith? Not a chance. When the neighbor came knocking with church flyers, I'd force a polite smile and shut the door fast. Thanks, but we're fine like this. Except we weren't. There were nights I cried in the bathroom without knowing why. It was the emptiness screaming for purpose, a purpose I kept ignoring. Work, daycare, supermarket, repeat. My life was a loop of tasks. I was a project manager at a construction company, proud of every deadline I beat. Look at the supermom, my friends would joke in the WhatsApp group. But behind the thumbs up emojis, I was exhausted. Lucas had started asking about Father in Heaven after a little party at school. "Mommy, my friend said Jesus takes care of us. Is that true?" I swallowed hard, forced a smile, and said, "Sweetie, we take care of ourselves, okay? Mommy protects you." He accepted it, but I caught a tiny flicker of doubt in his eyes. That night, I doubted my own answer. Why did that question keep echoing in my mind? I'd never prayed in my life, but I felt a strange chill. Coincidence, I told myself. Just coincidence. Life went on as usual. Wake up at 5:30, pack Lucas's lunch, drop him off at daycare, rush to work, pick him up at 6, frozen dinner, bedtime story, sleep. I lived on autopilot, thinking that was how you built a safe life. But here's the thing, I hadn't counted on the unexpected. In that little 2-bedroom apartment, with white walls and the smell of fresh coffee every morning, I felt like the queen of my castle. "Nothing's going to touch us," I'd whisper while locking the door at night. But danger doesn't knock first, does it? It slips in quietly, when you least expect it. And that fateful night, when the smell of smoke filled my room, I had no idea I was about to experience the greatest deliverance of my life, and that Jesus, the one I never believed in, was about to show himself in a way I'd never forget. I woke up with my throat burning, heart racing. The clock read 3:17 a.m. What's that smell? I thought, still half asleep. I jumped up, and that's when I saw it. Thick black smoke rising through the crack under the door. My first thought was Lucas. My God, or rather, my instinct, screamed inside me. I ran into the hallway, and the heat hit me like a wall. His room was already engulfed in orange flames dancing across the walls. I screamed his name, but the smoke swallowed my voice. I tried to move forward, but something, a firm, invisible force, pulled me back by the shoulders. And then, amid the chaos, a calm, deep, unmistakable voice whispered in my ear, "Trust me." I froze. Who was that? What was that? But the fire roared, the ceiling cracked, and the next second threatened to be my last. I stood there, paralyzed, my hand still on the doorknob to Lucas's room, the heat searing my skin, smoke filling my lungs like cotton. "Trust me." The voice wasn't loud, not a shout. It was a steady whisper, right next to my ear, as if someone was standing behind me. I'd never heard anything outside my own thoughts before, but that moment sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with fear. "Who's there?" I yelled, but all I heard back was the groaning of the ceiling. I tried to push forward again because moms don't think, they act, but that invisible force held me back once more, stronger this time, almost throwing me backward. That's when the ceiling collapsed. A deafening crash shook the floor, wood, plaster, everything falling exactly where I would have been if I'd taken one more step. That was when the miracle began, though I didn't know it yet. The hallway turned into a tunnel of flames. I coughed, my eyes burning, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. "Lucas!" I screamed, but my voice came out hoarse, weak. I knew he was in there, sleeping. Maybe already know. I couldn't think that. I had to go in. But his door was on fire, flames licking the wood like it was alive. I crouched down, trying to breathe through my shirt collar, when I heard sirens in the distance. Firefighters. Someone must have called them. But it was too late, I thought. Too late for my boy. Then, suddenly, an odd calm came over me. It wasn't giving up, it was peace. As if that voice had left a trace of hope in the middle of hell. "He's alive." I felt deep inside. I didn't know how. It wasn't logic, it was faith starting to bloom, even though I didn't want it to. I ran down the opposite hallway, trying to find a way out, but the whole apartment was burning. The living room, the kitchen, everything. Then I remembered the window in my bedroom, 3rd floor, high up, but maybe I could jump onto the neighbor's awning. I ran back, stumbling over what used to be furniture. I opened the window, and the fresh air hit my face like a slap. I looked down, people in the street, flashing lights, voices shouting. "Jump, ma'am. Jump." I hesitated. What about Lucas? How could I leave him? And then I saw it. Down below, a firefighter coming out of the building, holding a small bundle in his arms. A bundle wearing Spider-Man pajamas. My heart stopped. It was him. It was Lucas. Safe. Without a scratch. How? How had he gotten out? I ran down the fire escape, my legs shaking, my body sweaty and covered in soot. When I reached the street, I ran straight to the firefighter. "He's my son. He's my son." He handed me Lucas, who opened his big, frightened, but alive, eyes. "Mommy," he whispered, and I hugged him so tight I almost crushed him. "How did you get out, sweetheart?" "How?" He looked at me with a certainty no 5-year-old should have and said, "It was Jesus, Mommy." He picked me up and took me outside. "He said you were coming." I froze. Jesus? My son, who barely knew how to say the Lord's Prayer, talking about Jesus like he was his best friend? In that moment, the miracle wasn't just physical. It was the beginning of a transformation that would turn my life upside down. I looked at the firefighter, desperate for an explanation. "How did you get in?" The ceiling had collapsed. The door was blocked. He scratched his head, confused. "Ma'am, when we arrived, the boy was already at the back door, sitting there waiting. Alone. Nobody saw who brought him. We just picked him up. Alone?" My apartment didn't even have an accessible back door. It was an interior hallway, locked. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't coincidence. This was God's presence working where logic failed. And that voice that stopped me? It hadn't been a hallucination. It was Jesus saving me from walking into the fire and preparing me for the greatest miracle of my life, seeing my son rescued by hands I couldn't see. I couldn't let go of Lucas. Not for a second. We sat on the sidewalk, covered in soot, wrapped in the firefighter's thermal blanket, while the building behind us burned like a giant bonfire. The air was thick with the smell of melting plastic and charred wood. Sirens, screams, crying neighbors, but to me, the whole world had stopped at those 2 words. It was Jesus. My son, who could barely tie his own shoes, spoke with the calm of an adult. I looked into his brown eyes, still wide open, and asked, barely whispering, "Sweetheart, what did he look like?" Lucas didn't hesitate. Tall, Mommy. Long hair, a beard. There was light all around him. He picked me up and said, "Don't be afraid, little angel. Your mommy's coming." I felt a lump in my throat. Part of me wanted to laugh. The way I always laughed when someone talked about a heavenly vision. But the other part, oh, that part trembled. Because Lucas never lied. Not even when he broke Grandma's vase and tried to fix it with tape. He described everything in detail. The room was on fire, Mommy, but where he stood, it didn't burn. It smelled nice, like flowers. And he sang softly a song I don't know, but it made me sleepy. Sleepy? In the middle of a fire? I glanced at the firefighter, who was listening quietly from the side. He was unconscious when we found him, the man said, almost embarrassed. But he woke up saying that. Kid stuff, right? I shook my head. No, it wasn't kid stuff. It was a miracle. And I, the proud atheist, was starting to doubt my own disbelief. That night, we were taken to the hospital just as a precaution. Tests, oxygen, x-rays. Everything was perfect. Not a single burn. No smoke in his lungs. The doctor, an older man with a spotless white coat, looked at the results and said, "Honestly, I can't explain it. A child exposed to that level of smoke should be intubated." I thanked him with an automatic smile, but inside I knew. I knew it wasn't luck. It was deliverance. It was God's presence holding my son when I couldn't. Lucas fell asleep in my arms on the hospital gurney, and I stared up at the white ceiling, silently repeating, what if it's true? What if he really exists? For the first time in 34 years, I didn't have a rational answer. Just an emptiness that was slowly being filled with something I couldn't yet understand, but that already made me cry without knowing why. The next day, a social worker came to speak with me. "Mrs. Anna, we need to find somewhere for you to stay. The apartment, well, there's nothing left." I nodded, still in shock. Clothes, photos, Lucas's toys, everything had turned to ash. But you know what hurt most? It wasn't losing the material things. It was the fear of almost losing what truly mattered, my son. And then, while I was filling out forms, Lucas tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, can I tell the firefighter that Jesus saved me?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to hush him, to say it was just imagination. But I looked at that little soot-covered face, smiling so wide it could barely fit, and said, "You can, sweetheart." And he went. He ran to the firefighter, who was sipping coffee in the break room, and told the story all over again. The man listened, scratched the back of his neck, and muttered, "Kid, I've seen a lot in this job. But this? I can't explain." That same afternoon, a nurse came up to us, her badge read Senior Marcia. "Can I pray for you?" she asked. Me, the woman who always said, "No, thank you," found myself saying, "Yes." She held my hand and prayed softly, asking for protection, purpose, transformation. And I cried. I cried like a child, because for the first time I wasn't rejecting. I was receiving. And the strangest part? When she finished, Lucas said, "Amen," a word he had never heard at home. I looked at him, then up through the hospital window, and felt warmth in my chest. It wasn't fever. It was faith being born. But there was still a battle ahead. How could an atheist like me accept that Jesus not only saved my son but was calling me by name? We were taken to a city shelter, a huge hall filled with metal bunk beds and the smell of disinfectant mixed with reheated coffee. I carried Lucas in my arms, sleeping deeply, his face still smudged with soot. We only had the clothes on our backs, me in cotton pajamas with burned hems, him in his now gray Spider-Man pajamas. A volunteer handed us a kit, 2 toothbrushes, soap, a thin blanket. "Welcome," she said with a tired smile. I thanked her, but inside I screamed, "Welcome to what?" I've lost everything. But when I lay down on the lower bunk and pulled Lucas close against my chest, I felt him breathing peacefully. Alive. And then the tears came, not from despair, but gratitude. Because, for the first time, I didn't know who to thank, but I wanted to. Lucas woke up in the middle of the night, startled by an old man snoring in the bunk beside us. "Mommy, where's my bed?" he asked sleepily. I hugged him tight. "We're on an adventure, sweetheart. We'll get another one soon." He accepted it, then asked, "Is Jesus going to bring my bed back?" I swallowed hard. I don't know, love. But, stubborn as any child, he insisted. Yes, he will. He told me he's taking care of us now. I wanted to correct him, to say it was imagination, but the words wouldn't come out. Instead, I asked, "What else did he tell you?" Lucas thought for a moment, scratching his nose. That you're scared, but you don't have to be. That he's holding your hand even when you can't see him. In that moment, I felt a weight in my chest. How could a child know that? How? The next morning, the shelter served bread with margarine and watery coffee with milk. I ate in silence, watching the other families, some crying, others nervously laughing. A woman, around 60, gray hair tied up in a bun, sat beside me. "First time here?" she asked. I nodded. She smiled. "I lost everything in a flood back in 2018. Thought I'd never get back up. But look at me, still here, alive." I wanted to ask how, but she went on. "It was Jesus, dear. Only he can explain." I rolled my eyes inwardly. Old reflex, but my mouth said, "My son says the same thing." She laughed. "Kids don't lie about those things. They see what we insist on ignoring." Then she handed me a small pamphlet. "If you ever want to talk, the church next door serves coffee on Wednesdays. No pressure." I put it in my pocket. I didn't throw it away. The day went by in lines, documents, insurance registration, donated clothes. Lucas got a half-bald teddy bear, but hugged it like gold. I watched him playing with other kids, telling the story of the man of light, over and over. And every time he spoke, more people stopped to listen. A teenage girl was recording, another was crying. I'd always avoided the spotlight, but I started to feel pride. Pride in my boy. Pride in what he'd lived through. But also fear. Fear that once we went back to normal, I'd forget. Forget the voice. Forget the rescue. Forget that I almost lost everything. So that night, alone in the shared bathroom, staring at my reflection in the cracked mirror, I asked a question I never thought I would. If you really exist, why did you save us? I wasn't expecting an answer, but it came. Not in thunder, not in light, just a thought so clear it felt like a voice. Because I loved you before you loved me. I braced myself on the sink, my legs weak. Love me, who didn't even know how to pray. Loved by someone I denied all my life? In that moment, the shelter floor felt sacred. I cried again, but it was different. Tears of someone beginning to see. And when I went back to the bunk, Lucas was already asleep, teddy bear on his chest. I lay beside him, held his little hand, and for the first time in my life, I whispered, "Jesus, if it's really you, teach me how to believe." Then I slept. Slept like I hadn't in years. Because, for the first time, I wasn't alone in the dark. Wednesday hit like a slap of reality. The shelter was crowded, the smell of mildew mixed with sweetened condensed milk from breakfast. I got up early to help in the community kitchen, peeling potatoes, washing dishes, anything to keep from thinking. Lucas stayed with the other kids, drawing the man of light on donated printer paper. I looked at his drawings. A tall man in a white robe, arms open, Lucas in his lap. Every line was a punch to my atheism. "Mom, look. He's smiling at you too," he'd say, pointing to the paper. I smiled back, but inside it was war. It's just imagination, Anna. Just imagination. Except imagination doesn't explain a collapsed roof, an unhurt child, or a voice in the middle of fire. The bun lady, Mrs. Lucia, showed up again at lunchtime. "There's coffee at church today, dear. Bring your boy." I hesitated. Church? Me? The same woman who laughed at TV preachers? But Lucas tugged my hand. "Let's go, Mommy. I want to see if Jesus is there too." I laughed nervously. "All right, let's go." We left the shelter at 4 in the afternoon, me in borrowed sweats, him in worn-out sneakers. The church was a simple hall, peeling white walls, plastic chairs, a squeaky ceiling fan. About 30 people, most from the shelter. The smell of homemade cake and fresh coffee. Someone played an out-of-tune guitar, singing "Because He Lives, I Can Face Tomorrow." I stood at the door, ready to bolt. But Lucas ran to the front, sat on the floor, clapping his hands. The pastor was a thin man with thick glasses and a smoker's voice. "Good afternoon, family. Today we're talking about deliverance." He told the story of Peter in prison, chains falling, angel opening the gate. I listened, arms crossed, but every word hit. God doesn't need logic to act. He works in the impossible. Lucas turned to me and whispered loudly, "Just like with me, Mommy." A few heads turned and smiled. I blushed. Then came the moment that changed everything. The pastor asked everyone to share a deliverance story. A girl talked about being healed from cancer. A man about a motorcycle accident. When it was my turn, I froze. I lost everything in a fire. But my son came out alive. He says it was Jesus. Silence. Then applause. And Mrs. Lucia shouted, "Glory to God." After the service, they served cornbread and soda. Lucas ate 3 pieces, face covered in crumbs. I drank black coffee, talking with a woman named Rose, also a single mom. I used to be like you, angry atheist, mad at God for existing, until my daughter almost drowned. Now I work in the church daycare. She hugged me. "You don't have to understand everything today, Anna. Just take the first step." I nodded, eyes wet. When we left, the pastor handed me a small blue Bible. "Read Psalm 91. Slowly." I put it in my bag. On the way back to the shelter, Lucas sang the church song, off-key. And I sang along, softly. For the first time, that night, in the bunk, I opened the Bible under my phone's flashlight. Psalm 91. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. I read it out loud, trembling. Lucas was asleep. I finished the chapter and felt a warmth in my chest, like someone had lit a candle inside me. I closed my eyes and, without thinking, said, "Jesus, if it's really you, show me the next step." I didn't fall asleep right away. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the others snore, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. I was curious. There was a tiny thread of faith I didn't know I had, and that thread would lead me somewhere I never imagined, to my knees. I didn't sleep that whole night. The blue Bible stayed open on Psalm 91, my phone's light glowing like a lantern. Lucas snored on his back, teddy bear on his chest, and I could feel my heart in my throat. "If you're real, talk to me now," I challenged silently. Nothing. Just the creaking fan and a baby crying in the corner. Then it came, not a voice of thunder, but a warmth rising from my chest to my throat, like someone had placed a hand right over my sternum and pressed gently. I climbed down the bunk, grabbed the Bible, and ran to the communal bathroom. The door creaked, tiles cold, light flickering. I locked it, knelt on the dirty floor, and broke down. Man, I don't know how to pray. I don't even know where to start. But if you saved my son, if you pulled me back from that fire, then save me from myself. The words tumbled out between sobs, nose running, breath shaking. I had never cried like that, not when my marriage ended, not when I buried my mom. It was the cry of someone shedding an armor built over 34 years, piece by piece. I doubted you my whole life. I laughed at those who believed. But now I see, Jesus, without you, I'm going nowhere. And then, I felt it, a peace too big for words. Like that bathroom had turned into a sanctuary. I stayed there maybe 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. When I stood up, my legs were tingling, but the weight was gone. I went back to the bunk, lay down next to Lucas, and did something I never thought I would. I put my hand on his forehead and prayed softly, "Jesus, cover my son with your blood. Go where I can't reach." Lucas stirred in his sleep, opened one eye, and smiled. "You're glowing, Mommy." I laughed and cried at the same time. Glowing? Me, in an old sweatshirt with messy hair? But I understood. It was God's presence reflecting on my face. The next morning, the whole shelter felt different. The watery coffee tasted good. The hard bread felt like bakery bread. I helped in the kitchen singing because he lives completely off-key. Mrs. Lucia saw me and winked. "Look at the new believer, everyone." I laughed, embarrassed but happy. For the first time, I wanted someone to call me a believer. Someone from the insurance company called. "We found a temporary apartment for you, furnished, close to the daycare." I thanked her, hung up, and shouted to Lucas, "God found us a new home, son." He clapped his hands. "I told you, he takes care of us." And I started to believe that his care was only the beginning. That night before bed, I opened the Bible again. John 3 verse 16. I read it out loud. "For God so loved the world," and I stopped at the word loved. I, who had never truly felt loved, felt a hug that went right through the page. I closed the book, turned off the light, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. Jesus was sitting at the edge of my bed. I couldn't see him, but I could feel him. And that feeling was leading me to the final step, telling the world what he did for an ex-atheist who only knew how to doubt. 6 months later, I barely recognized the Anna who used to wake up at 3:17 a.m. smelling smoke. The new apartment was small, but sunlight poured through the window, and Lucas already had a new bed, with Spider-Man sheets the church had bought. I'd traded project management for a part-time job at the church daycare, smaller paycheck, but peace no money could buy. I woke up early, read the Bible in the kitchen while the coffee brewed, and prayed out loud, "Good morning, Jesus. Thank you for another day." Lucas would run in. "Can I read too?" And we'd read together, him with his kid's book, me with my blue Bible full of pen marks. It was our ritual, our daily miracle. I started sharing my story, first with friends from the shelter, then with the moms group at the daycare, then at Sunday service. I was an atheist. I used to laugh at people who talked about God. But he found me in the fire. People cried. Hands lifted. Someone shouted, "Glory." I trembled every time, but I kept going. Because every time I spoke, the transformation felt more real. I saw mothers who, like me, were living on autopilot, and I told them, "If he saved my son, he can save yours. If he changed my life, he can change yours." And he did. I could see it in their eyes. One woman hugged me after service. I was thinking about giving up. Today, I started believing again. I cried, because the deliverance didn't end with the fire. It spread. Lucas grew up telling his story. At school, on the street, to his friends. Jesus carried me in his arms. The teachers asked me to come speak to the class. I'd go, wearing a simple dress, Bible in hand, and tell everything. The fire, the voice, the falling roof, the trust me. The kids would listen with their mouths open. The parents would come up after. "My daughter won't stop talking about Jesus now." I'd smile. That's how faith spreads. It starts with a child who saw what adults refused to believe. Today I lead a support group for mothers who lost everything, their homes, husbands, hope. We meet every Tuesday in the church hall. We serve coffee, we pray, we cry, we laugh. I teach what I learned the hard way. God doesn't keep us out of the fire. He walks with us through it. And I show the photos before, me in a business suit, fake smile. After, me in jeans, hugging Lucas in front of the church, both of us glowing. The women look, touch the photo, and say, "I want that peace." I answer, then let go. That's all. Let go of the control you never really had. Sometimes, in the silence of the night, I go back to that shelter bathroom in my mind. I kneel again, now on the rug in my room, and thank him. Thank you for not giving up on me when I had given up on you. Lucas now sleeps with the light off, without fear. So do I. Because I know God's presence isn't an event, it's a way of life. And that purpose I used to look for in promotions, cars, status? It was here all along, to be a bridge between the miracle I lived and the miracle someone out there is still waiting for. Because if Jesus could transform an atheist who laughed at him, imagine what he can do with you, who's already almost believing.